Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I am doing something that I love to do, which is have an in-person conversation with somebody. And my wonderful guest today is the one and only Andrew Wang. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me here in person today in New York City.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we're going to get into lots of good stuff here. I've wanted to have you on for a while, but the thing that spurred this particular conversation at this particular period of time is you announced the launch of Devotion. So we are going to talk all about what that is, whatever you can share, your visions for that, how you got into it, what this means for your next stage of your Web3 career. But I also really want to dive into your background, which I think folks have gotten snippets of probably in Twitter Spaces and others. But you have a really very interesting and cool journey into Web3, and I want to get into that. I also just want to pick your brain on the macro, what's happening in NFTs right now. So we may even start there. But before we get into all this, we do need to pause to hear a word from our lovely sponsors who make this show possible.
There is a brand new staking feature in the Ledger Live app today. We all like staking the assets that we're bullish on, and now you can stake 7 different coins inside the Ledger Live app. Cosmos, Polkadot, Tron, Algorand, Tezos, Solana, and of course Ethereum. With Ledger Live, you can take money from your bank account, buy your most bullish crypto asset, and stake that asset to its network, all inside the Ledger Live app. Through a partnership with Figment, Ledger also lets you choose which validator you want to stake your assets with. And Ledger is running its own validating nodes, offering a convenient way to participate in network validation, and it even comes with slashing insurance. Ledger Live is truly becoming the battle station for the bankless world, so go download Ledger Live. If you have a Ledger already, you probably already have it, and get started securely staking your crypto assets. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Okay, Andrew, we're gonna start tough. Is the 10K PFP meta era over for good?
I mean, I would love to know where that idea is coming from, because it seems like on my feed, Twitter is never perfect for getting engaged with what's going on, but it seems like some 10K PFPs are sort of getting a revival. I mean, CryptoPunks, for one. Like, sure, you can talk about the floor, but I think it's more just like seeing more people that I know change their PFPs to punks. I mean, one of my co-founders for Devotion, Psyduck, he changed to a punk. He had been this one-of-one cool cat before, and we were sort of joking and saying, like, obviously it's not the most important thing, but do we want a PFP change as we announce this project? And he was like, I think I should go with a punk. And then I saw a bunch of other people change to punks recently. It's sort of interesting. Whenever I shout out a smaller project, I'm always like, should I do it? You better sponsor me if I do. Yeah. But disclosure, like, I don't work with them. But NFT Inspect is this thing that lets you see who the holders are for a given community through Twitter. It's like this Chrome extension. Oh. And you can like click on a Bored Ape and see like the top influencers or top people with the most followers who have a Bored Ape as their profile picture. And I think one of the things that always stands out to me is whenever I click like punks and apes or doodles or cool cats, if I change my profile picture to like a cool cat or a doodle, all of a sudden I'm like top 1 or top 2 or top 3 for that project. And for me, it's like weird because I'm not a celebrity. I'm not some necessarily famous crypto person, but I can just make that my PFP and all of a sudden I'm there at the top, which is sort of strange because I hear so much about all these different celebrities, big names coming in, you see all this volume, but are people necessarily turning that into their identity, or is it something they hold because they see value in it? And I think, to me, that's the question of whether 10K PFPs are alive. It depends how you evaluate it. Is it the number of people holding it? Is it the volume? Or is it the number of people really leaning into that digital identity and making it a core part of their, their experience in Web3? And I think we've never necessarily gotten to the latter part. I think that's kind of how I feel. I don't know if that's a hot take. It just seems like the number of people who have really made a punk into their identity and revolved things around it has never been that high. Apes seems like a lot, but really, in terms of raw numbers, out of 10,000, it's never really been that high. I feel like we talk about digital identity as the first step of 10K PFPs, and some of us feel like we've moved beyond that. I feel like we haven't even really gotten there yet.
Hit that.
We haven't really even explored what does it mean for a critical mass of holders to be using it, using their commercial rights, right? Writing books, making movies, creating, new things, new art based on that. And if that potential's still there, I think we haven't actually gotten to see PFPs.
Do you think that potential's still there? Like, do you think that's still where we end up?
I think it's going to take a lot more time for us to get there, because at some point it's not just the image, it's the whole brand around it. It's the in real life activations. It's whatever utility airdrops are going on. It's whatever it means to be a part of this, and knowing that there's such a limited supply. You talked about this when you had Zeneca on to talk about Doodles, right? Doodles moving on to Flow for part of their collection, supposedly. Trying to...
I feel like I hear that as a definitive, but then I'm like, I don't know. I've heard Jordan say he wants to settle on Ethereum, and I'm still hoping that they go with a layer 2.
Okay, so we don't know. But this idea of this PFP is trying to look in terms of not weeks or months. I think most people struggle to look beyond days, but years. And when you think about a few years from now, if everything's still here, which I hope it is for most good projects, then I think at that point, then we'll really see the potential of PFPs become unlocked. Like, PFPs take up this tiny real estate on your Twitter profile that was never truly designed for NFTs. I mean, Twitter has NFT integration, but it makes your PFP a hexagon, like, great. So I don't really think we've even gotten there to properly evaluate if PFPs are dead. So we have to see.
I interviewed Eric Cauldron Snowfro, founder of Art Blocks, recently. I think that episode just came out. And we were talking, and I was saying, I feel like I really understand why Art Blocks is having a tremendous amount of success right now. And I would say it's the same reason that I think Punks is having a lot of success. It's funny because, of course, Punks is a 10K PFP, and you could argue, obviously, kicked off that entire trend. But I think of them more as collectible art. And I feel like what we're seeing is art doing very well in this time, which doesn't surprise me because I understand that analog. Like, I can explain to my parent or my grandparent even, like, hey, generative art is a growing movement. It's going to have more prominence in the broader art scene in X number of years. And these are going to be the Picassos and the Andy Warhols or whatever of that movement. And so just like fine art today in the IRL has a ton of value, so too does this. I have this open question, which I'm curious if you have thoughts around. If we even know if value from like an ETH or fiat perspective will even be held in these PFPs, these other, maybe the ones that aren't categorized as art, even if they fulfill like the wildest potential. Like if these brands become totally mainstream, if Doodle's brand becomes wildly mainstream and there's movies and everybody recognizes it as this powerful IP, will these NFTs still be worth whatever, $50,000? Or will that be some great success for Doodles, but the NFT itself still won't necessarily hold that crazy value?
It's a really open question. I think for me, what's driven so much of the volume in both PFPs and art blocks has been having a really strong narrative about what the object itself means, but then that relationship to the holder. I think PFPs do a really, really good job of saying what that relationship is to the holder, but don't always do a good job of showing what it means, like, for the object itself. Like, what does this thing actually mean? So most people doing PFPs will say, hey, if you're a holder, you're going to get all of these benefits. We're going to give you airdrops. We might give you a token. We're going to let you into this party that's for cool kids. We're going to give you a companion collection. You're going to get more things and more things and more things. And I think at some point, a lot of people will realize, like, there has to really be like value behind those things that are given.
Yeah.
At some point, you see the same things being given over and over again. And it's like that discussion on land scarcity in the metaverse, right? It's like there's no reason it has to be confined to so-and-so pieces, right? Why don't we think more outside the box? And I think PFPs often run into this issue where they're trying so hard to say, hey, if you're a holder, here's what you'll get. And at some point, that might become a little bit boring or a little bit played out.
Yeah.
There was a time, even last year, when airdrops were kind of a new thing and people were really excited about it. But then once that becomes the norm, you have to raise expectations and do something even better. I mean, my co-founder, Sidug, says this. He kind of has drawn out this like 10K PFP death spiral on Twitter, where it's basically like because the goalposts have changed. Back when, like a year ago, you could announce, hey, we're doing an airdrop. Everybody would go crazy. You could even say, we might have some alpha for you. And then you would just see the floor fly. It was like the easiest thing to trade into. You all knew it. It was like this very obvious thing. But once you get to this point now where we are pretty much in a bear market, if you have an announcement that you think is going to move things and it doesn't, it's horrible, because it's almost like dealing with if you like a certain drug or a certain food. Like, I love McDonald's when I haven't had it in a long time. But when I have McDonald's 2 days in a row, I feel absolutely sick. So I have to step it up with like more. I need to get like larger fries. I can't just get Diet Coke. I need to get like a McFlurry. And then I just have to keep on like leveling up McDonald's. Exactly, for me to feel something. And, at some point when you're running this utility, you have no more to give, because it takes time, it takes money, it takes creativity, it takes that spark, it takes the right time and place. And, going back to the idea with art being that object in and of itself that can say why it's valuable. I think that, to me, maybe explains in part why art blocks is sort of having a run right now. It's not easier, but it's almost more interesting, and you can be in your own lane when you're saying why your thing is kind of valuable in and of itself.
Right.
I mean, I know Snowfro, he talks a lot about how with art blocks, they have to be generated like on the spot at the point of minting. And that's interesting, because you could otherwise generate like 1 trillion things and pick the 1,000 best ones. But now you have to make sure that all 1,000 look really good. Tyler Hobbs, when he talks about Fidenza in his work, he always says, it's not just about the code, it's about systematic thinking that goes behind the code. Yeah. How do I get my inputs really good so that the outputs are awesome? And when I see that, it's so much easier for me to fall in love with that narrative and know that that narrative can still be relevant years and years from now, compared to PFPs, knowing that people are fighting this death spiral and you may burn out at some point. Because art can speak for itself and you can speak for it. With PFPs, a lot of people are speaking on it and telling you what it is. And that can be tough.
So the latest meta feels like it is like free mint plus CCO plus maybe a little sprinkle of trolling. And I think Goblin Town obviously really kicked that off, but we've seen it with projects like Wizards, which is interesting. I don't know if you have thoughts on Wizards as a project or have been tracking that. But there's been others. I think God Hates NFTs, that project that came out of the fake protest that happened at NFT NYC, is an example. There's a number of them. And it has that CCO free mint combination, which I'm curious to get your perspective on that. But I also think there's like almost an immersive storytelling element that you're starting to see come in with some of these that I think are doing it better, like Goblin Town or Wizards. So what do you think of this current era we're in and this current version of how to launch an NFT project?
Yeah, I like that you brought up meta, because I think a lot of us only talk about the macro right now. And macro is important, right? Anything from interest rates to war, right? And then thinking about like what happened to Celsius and Three Arrows Capital. But I think to me, meta is just as important, because they're very related to one another, right? Part of what makes a meta is not just because the macro allows for it to happen, right? Like, it makes sense in a way for there to be free mints or cheaper mints at a time when people want to hold on to their liquidity as much as they can. But it's also that meta can sort of move beyond, because it gives you the opportunity to sort of innovate out of it and do something that's really interesting that catches people's attention. And of course, there will be copycats, people who try to ride those coattails, but there are also going to be like pretty insightful things that come out of it. I like to think of it as like a constraint, right? In this bear market, you can't sell out Pixelmon for 70 million anymore.
Thank God.
So right, you have to think of different ways around it. To me, like there is this, like you said, this performance art to things like goblins. And to me, it makes me think about, I think the closest comparison would be like reality TV in the 80s. So reality TV got big in a way because I think it was under Reagan, right? You like something with like all the like networks, you kind of like made it a lot more free market for people to be creating content. And so production costs skyrocketed essentially. So then all of a sudden you couldn't have the money to pay for all these shows. So you went for reality TV. It kind of came out of that era because reality TV is cheap in some ways, right? You can just film it with a camera. You can follow someone around, right? This sort of very indie, you know, in the moment, on the ground type of film. Beyond that, you don't have to pay the actors very much, right? The actors are kind of like happy to be there. And I make that comparison because Goblin Town was sort of like that. It was like, let's make a free mint and let you take it and make the memes out of it. We will make it possible to meme. Like we're going to use our own language. We're going to be silly. We're going to make the art, right? Like ugly, but on purpose. And from all these things, we're going to make you do the heavy lifting for us. And to me, that's interesting.
Are there projects you've been eyeing and or buying during this period?
You know, funny enough, I haven't really minted much in the last 2 months outside of buying my friend's work. Sometimes I fall into this trap where I know my friend is having trouble selling work. So I'm like, yeah, we're like getting drinks. I'm like, yeah, I'll buy your art, like promise. And I'll like dap them up. And then I'll like think, yeah, it'll probably be like 0.2 or 0.3. And then I go on OpenSea and it's listed for like 2 ETH.
Oh
and I'm
my
like,
God.
well, I said I was going to buy it. So now I have to buy it. But I think it's been more fun because it can be very stressful to follow everything that's minting in every project. I think part of why NFTs can be so stressful because people were stressed out a lot in the bull market, even when they were making money, because you have to make so many decisions every day. Like it really ends up being like hundreds, if not thousands, if you think about it. This floor is going up. Do I sell or do I hold? Those are both decisions, right? Do I see this long term or short term? Do I tweet about this? Do I tweet about that? Should I look at other projects, right? Should I sell some? Should I hold others? Right? You're like always thinking about
The infinite
what you
regret.
have to
That's
do.
the Zeneca line. It's like,
Sure.
it's infinite regret. When you have that many decisions to make, you can't time the market. You're going to sell, it'll go up another ETH, or you buy and it goes down, and you just are living in a constant state of feeling like you regret a decision you made.
It's like every decision you make, it leads to you feeling like two ways because more things will happen in that timeline. It's almost like, it's like the multiverse where like you can go to another dimension and like kill your parents, but then you wouldn't be not born because you killed them in a different dimension. So like you're okay in your dimension, but it's like this tree, right? It just like keeps getting bigger
You have
and bigger.
broken my brain on this one. I need to watch more Rick and Morty, I think.
I was watching a video essay explaining all the different kinds of time travel, and multiverse is actually the simplest one.
Oh,
Because
good.
a lot of
Oh,
other
that's
ones
great.
are
I
paradoxical.
can't wrap my head around the simple one. That's dope.
Yeah, no, the simple one. Basically, what I'm trying to say is like, I'm trying to like cut down on all these parallel universes where I'm asking myself what I could have done.
Yeah.
I want to reduce the number of decisions I make to things like, when I wake up, am I going to create something cool today? Am I going to talk to a friend, call my parents, you know, onboard somebody? Am I going to buy my friend's artwork when I think she's like really talented but hasn't done the marketing right and I really want to support her? I think cutting down on those decisions ultimately make me both someone who I think is appealing to a lot of people in the space because I'm kind of like that catharsis for them. And I can also see myself as being disliked for that reason because I'm in a place where I'm not necessarily making people money because the decisions that I'm making when they're like a dozen decisions a day are probably not the decisions that you could make or would be making.
Were you ever good at like, or are you good at flipping? Like, were you good at making money on the quick flip game?
No. Not
Is
at
it
all.
anyone? I think maybe that was a myth. I think maybe nobody was good at
there
that.
are a very small number of people who got in at a specific time who made money, I think. Like, you know, I don't think I'm a good flipper, and that's okay. I actually think that plays in my strengths because maybe this makes me like a kind of like bad person, but I get envious and I get jealous when I see really good projects because I'm like, well, not that I want them to fail, but I'm like, you're amazing. Like, you're so cool to think of this great idea. I felt that when I saw Goblin Town. I felt that the first time I saw Cool Cats when I knew barely anything about NFTs. My first thought is like, I want to be like you. I want to figure out how to think the way you do, learn from you, so that one day, if I'm doing something or if I'm teaching something or if I'm discussing something, you'll have helped me in some way. Like, I can't see myself like trading everything because it feels like in some ways like I'm putting myself in that zone where like I'm driving volume for a collection, but I'm just getting money out of it. I think there's so many more things besides money to get out of it. To me, like, I think it is easy to get rich when you are the person you're meant to be. You're being your best self. You're doing really cool things, and you've met really cool people. Once you set those things up, you know, it seems like it would be easy. So I guess it's a roundabout way to say I much prefer to invest in myself than invest in others unless they're really, really, really great. Or if they're really funny and I want to have some fun and buy a meme project.
I am going to ask you a very personal question, and maybe that can bridge us into some of your story. How do you make money?
You know, I think I had probably a couple good trades like a year ago, and I've sort of been riding that. I mean, for me, like, I think I'm just coming out of college, like, since a couple years ago. I'm very much good with just hanging out in my apartment, ordering some food, cooking a little bit, doing the simple things. I think I've been writing that for a little bit. You know, I am with UTA now, and I think they've been trying to solve that same issue. It's like, how do we make this kid money? How do we make sure he survives so that he stays in the space and keeps doing his thing? You know, I think it's a misconception. Like, I don't take money for spaces. So I don't make money from that. I think to me, those network effects and that reputation in the community is worth something later on. You know, I do different things. Like, for the longest time, I was tutoring kids and helping them with writing. And it's actually fairly lucrative. And that at times has also carried me. So, you know, side hustles, little things, get one good trade, write it out for like 4 or 5 months. And I feel like more people than you'd think probably do that. At least maybe I've found those people.
Well, I think there's this perception that if you have hundreds of thousands of followers and you're in the crypto space, like, you must be rich. And there's plenty of people who I think probably are or were before the market crashed, you know, but that's not always the case. And it's funny, we'll cut this out if this feels like inappropriate to share, but I happen to know you're a very honorable person. I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to take money for spaces so long as you really believed in the project as well. I mean, I have sponsors on this podcast. I don't feel guilty about that, right? But I know you don't take money for spaces, and I also know that UTA has put a lot of potential deals in front of you that you have turned down and turned down the opportunity to make a lot of money because it didn't feel right. So that was sort of why I'm curious, like, what your situation was. So you mentioned earlier, you were like, you don't think of yourself as a celebrity or a, you know, whatever, but you have a certain amount of fame, certainly within our industry, and again, have hundreds of thousands of followers. How did that happen? Like, take me to, like, when was the moment when you started to, was there a moment you started to get like tens of thousands of followers and your name was known? Was it Cool Cats? What was the impetus for all of this?
I think I'm really around the 1 year anniversary mark still of really going all in on NFTs. I think about a year ago, NBA Summer League is either just ended or is still going on. It might have just ended. That was like a big watershed moment for me because I just had a few thousand followers then. And Top Shot was still big at the time. And I had heard about how Dapper Labs was sending these like influencers or whatever to check out Top Shot in Vegas. And I was like, well, I'm not a Top Shot influencer. I just have a few thousand followers. But I was like, well, look, in ETH terms, it's like an ETH. And I can go for the whole week, do some fun things, document to people like what I'm up to. And it's 1 ETH. So I was like, should I send it? And everybody was like, yeah, send it. It's an ETH. So I sent it. I went to Vegas, had the time of my life. I did things like, remember I was in my Uber ride to the stadium to watch Summer League. And basically the driver was like, like, what are you doing? Are you here for the basketball stuff? And I was like, yeah, I'm also here for the NFT stuff. And he's like, what's NFTs? I told him about it, and he's like, listen, you take my number. I want to join you at the stadium. I'm going to leave my taxi in the yard, and I'm going to come see you. And I posted this picture of us hanging out, and like I like onboarded him to NFTs. He was like smiling, this like taxi driver. And people seemed to like that. It was not me trying to create something for content. There's this joke of like going around for homeless people and saying like, hey, like I'm recording you with Flash, like here's this water bottle. And for me, it was more just like I was doing all of the things that just feel natural to me. If I like something, I tell people about it. But I started documenting that for the first time in my life. It was almost like vlogging is, and people seemed to like that. I wasn't posting my trades all the time. I wasn't saying I made this much money or I think this is the next big project. I was sort of just living life. And I think a lot of people at the beginning were following me for personality. I think soon after that, you kind of got into the bull market, and I'm sure people followed me because they thought I could make the money. But I'm sorry, like if I let you guys down.
I'm sure you made some people money.
Yeah, but it was just like thinking like, I've always been a shy and anxious person, but I've seen myself as somebody who can shine in the right moment. If I'm on stage, or if I have to make a speech, or if I have to do something big, like I pick my moments. I'm not someone who's good at being on all the time, but it seemed like people wanted me to be. And I kind of explored that. That's come with its benefits and challenges, right? Being like on and being a personality as much as I can. But the saving grace has been that I don't have to try to be somebody I'm not. I'm just trying to be myself as much as possible. And hopefully that reaches people.
I think the authenticity thing is it is the most critical piece that you can have if you want to have a long career. Like you can be really inauthentic and get a tremendous following in the short term, but I don't think you can sustain a career that way. So it was about a year ago. So you started on Top Shot. That was sort of your initial foray into all of this?
Yeah, I would say like I bought my first pack in January, got a person I didn't like, and then I quit for like 4 months.
Okay. And at that point, you were recently out of Columbia journalism?
So I didn't drop out until later at the end of that, or in the fall. So I was starting journalism school. And why I was doing that was because I felt like I wasn't doing things right as a journalist. I was not making any money. I was, destroying myself to write what I thought were good articles just to make a couple $100. Like alpha, like I'm Chinese. And like, and this was a time when on the news, there are a lot of news reports of like, Asian, like elderly people, generally speaking, like being attacked in urban places, like in, New York where I live. And to me, that was unsettling because I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I had a pretty good like suburban upbringing, but it's really interesting. My parents, my mom and dad would like bring my family over from China and like put them up in places because they were lifting everybody in my extended family out of poverty. Really like respect them for that. And so they had put my great uncle up in a place near us, maybe like not as great a part of town, but giving him a place and helping him get his feet on the ground. He's a real blue collar guy, worked as a repairman, and yeah, basically like he was murdered when I was young in what we think was a hate crime, given the information that we have. And so for me, that kind of cut deep, seeing what was happening.
How old were you when that happened?
I was about like 9 years old. And so seeing what was going on again, I was like, oh, I need to write about this because it's important.
This last year when there was the Stop Asian Hate movement happening because of all the murders.
Yes. And so I wrote about this and I said, this is the most important piece I will ever write because it's not my take on politics. It's not a meme article, which I've done for money in the past. It was like a real serious thing that cut deep. And, I wrote an article talking about how, I've been through it, but I want us to come together. Like I said before the show, I'm not always a guy with a lot of hot takes. I'm like the guy trying to spread peace and positivity because it's maybe just how I'm wired or how I was raised. And so I wrote it. I think I wrote it well. But it was a hard piece to write. And when I put it out there, I could go to the kiosk outside my apartment and read it. But online, the comments were just vicious. Like, nobody cared. People even joked about him, which was really horrible to me. And
this was for the Washington Post.
This was for the Washington Post, right? It's a really good, reputable organization, relative to, I think, everything in the field. And I was just like, whoa, like, am I stupid? Or did I choose the wrong industry? Or is the industry just broken? Or are the people that they serve broken? And this kind of
all
set
of the
me,
above.
maybe all of the above, right? And kind of like sent me into this spiral. And I think the worst thing was, I always get my hair cut. I get it faded like really nicely.
Yeah,
and I have reasons I can get into that later. But like 3 weeks later, I was on my way to my barber, Alex. And on my way there, I just got a notification that I had $300 deposited into my account. And I kind of just broke down on the street crying.
It was $300 for the article.
For the
That's
article.
what you've been paid.
Yeah. And it was just this thing of like, I went through so much. And it's not about the money. When you do something like that, it never is about the money. But the money was almost like an FU because that's how it felt to me at the time. And I was like, wow, like I either have to go to school or I'm never going to do this again. So I decided I was just going to go to school, but I was obviously spiraling, going to a dark place. Things got worse when I was playing pickup basketball at the gym in Midtown. It's a cool gym. Like LeBron plays there, Harden plays there. It's like a really fancy gym. But I went there and maybe it was the universe telling me that I could never be like them because one of the first times I played, I got hit in the head really, really badly. And I had this concussion that went on for over a month. And so you can think of all these things compounding. Trying to do the thing I thought I was meant to do, which was right. Can't do that. Trying to play basketball, which I like. Can't do that. I'm stuck in bed every day. Can't run, can't eat well, can't get exercise. I have this blanket over my head that I cut a hole in so I could kind of like watch the NBA playoffs through the little slit in the blanket.
Wait, why do you have a blanket on your head?
Because the light sensitivity. When you have a concussion, like light is just like, it's like you're a vampire. Like when you see it, like it actually like burns. You're like, oh, it burns. And so I was watching these games and throughout that time, I discovered Top Shot. I was like, wait. Well, we should say rediscovered because I kind of like thought about that thing.
So what month are we in now? You bought it in January, didn't get a player you liked, quit, and now we're in...
And then we're in like May.
Okay.
And I'm really starting to dive deep into it again. I'm trying to learn a little bit about NFTs. But this was still like the ramp. I feel like I really, really got in on technically July 2nd, 2021, which was the second day Cool Cats was released. But because I stayed all night trying to put a deal together for the rarest Cool Cat, I consider it still the first day because I didn't sleep until I bought it at 8 a.m. Then I had the best sleep of my life. So my true genesis, it feels like, July 2nd.
Well, I really want to talk about the Cool Cat thing because that's when I first, I feel like, got to know who you were. But do you feel like your experience in the journalist industry, and I'm really curious, like, had you just randomly submitted your piece to the Washington Post and they accepted it, or how had that come together? Because I've had a piece published in the Washington Post and I didn't get any money. And I'm curious where my check is.
I got infinitely more than you.
I'm curious how that happened.
Yeah, Washington Post.
Yeah,
you know,
where's my check?
We're going to FUD Washington Post,
Yeah.
especially if they do NFTs.
Oh, I will someday give my true thoughts on media. I've already given some of them. I will FUD it any day. Anyway, but so how had that come together? And then I have a question about that gets us to NFTs.
Yeah, a lot of news publications have rules that if you're pitching an article to their submission box, do not send it to other places. For me, I'm like, that's bullshit.
Yes.
Right? Like when there's such a low hit rate anyways, I don't care. I'm going to send it to 100 places. And if 2 say yes, we'll figure it out from there. But I'm not going to send it to one place, wait weeks, not get a response.
Especially when it's
used to
topical.
that. I used to play by those
I was so
rules,
nervous about
right?
that when I submitted my thing places. I was like, oh my God, I think I followed the rule because I was an idiot being like, oh, I don't want to get like unqualified. But so was that, had you pitched the concept for the story? You had submitted the story and then it got accepted?
So I sent it to a bunch of places. You have to kind of
Fully
change up
formed,
the pitch
like
a little bit.
Or no, this was a pitch to like write the article for them.
I think for the Washington Post, they wanted a full draft.
Okay.
And that's interesting too. The idea of like doing all this work for it to maybe not get published.
Yeah.
I think I have so many, like I have this file on my computer that's just like all the stuff I never got to put out. But I had already done the work for. And I was telling my girlfriend at the time, I was like, they're not going to respond to me. It's the general submissions portal. And then they're actually the only ones who got back and wanted it. So it was a nice little surprise. But it was a cool moment that didn't last that long.
Do you know what their monetization structure is? Like, were you given an explanation for why it was $300?
It was more like a surprise, like we're also paying you type of thing.
WaPo, where the heck is my money?
I was happy at the time. When they first told me, I was like, well, this is important to me.
Yeah.
If I'm getting paid, like $1 is better than $0.
Yeah.
But then later on, I realized that $300 was like even more of an FU in some ways. I don't know.
Why did later you realize it was even more?
Well, it's like thinking about like how many people it reaches. But then I think it also goes to the idea that like, look, I concede. I don't think like news publication models are necessarily that lucrative.
Yeah.
Right? You're subscribing, right, to like get news in the mail or to get it digitally. And I think a lot of industries thought when they were going digital, because they were like, hey, more people are on their computers, tablets, phones, this is going to be a big revolution. Well, it's still super annoying, right? You're getting like badgered every month to like keep going with the subscription or like, have you considered this other thing? And it's kind of just like, all right, I pay this with my credit card every month.
Yeah.
NFTs are totally different for obvious reasons, like having a piece of the pie, getting airdrops, getting utility, having some sort of like real recognition for your loyalty, things like that, and having that all recorded on a blockchain. I think, not saying news outlets should do that necessarily. I think Time has explored it, but I just think they don't make a lot of money. So part of me understands that, but it's also the value of the work relative to what you're paid for.
Well, it's a very labor-intensive industry, right? Media companies are not working on big margins because every new output required heavy labor. It's not like software where you can let it run on autopilot at a certain point. So I understand that, and also it's an area where market dynamics are broken, as in a number of other places, right? Because they can get content for free easily because the cachet of the Washington Post means that there are tons of people waiting in line to get something printed there, and would do it for free simply to have the cachet of being able to say you're published there. So this leads me to how much of your initial attraction to NFTs, or when you're looking at Cool Cats, for example, right after all this goes down, is a recognition of the potential to fix this broken model and the ownership and the royalties and the getting creators paid, and how much it was purely, oh, this is cool, and then the understanding of all of that came later.
I'm going to be honest. I think it was almost a kind of selfish motivation of wanting to be like, this doesn't work for me. Like, F that, I'm going to go do something else. And that's why by the time I started journalism school in the fall, which I had applied 2 months prior, I was already kind of half checked out. I was in classes like trying to secretly like use my phone to look up NFTs. When in college, I was that one kid who never was on their phone. Even if I was in like a big lecture hall, no way.
You were a
right?
true
I was
nerd.
that person. You know, like when you're in a class and there are people not paying attention and you like stare at the teacher to make them feel like you're really paying attention,
yeah.
so it like balances out somehow.
I did that too, though. I was definitely a kid who would also be on my phone, but I would feel bad when it became so abundantly clear that like the teacher had sort of lost the class and nobody was paying attention. I would feel bad for the teacher. So that was an empathy play for me, not because I actually was as studious as it sounds like you were, but.
Yeah, but you know, for me, why I say Cool Cats was my real like day one is because it was almost a selfish motivation to want to do what I saw Klon, the artist of Cool Cats, doing.
So again, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, we're going to broadly change all these systems initially. I'm sure that's part of a big part of the appeal now. It was like, these are cool cats. Was it like the collectible piece? What was the underlying thing that made you say, I'm already checked out of journalism school, I'm in NFTs?
It was a narrative. And I think, to me, that was what made Cool Cats so special to me on day one. And that would be my question for it now. Like, is it still able to deliver on that narrative and that promise? Just to share that real quick, it was me coming from a place where I just felt really bad, almost humiliated by the work that I was doing. And I jumped into this Discord channel called Origins for Cool Cats, where Cont, the artist, talked about trying to freelance for years and years, falling in love with this thing. He had been sketching it in classes, like on the margins, doodling it, and you see it kind of take shape over months and then years and then a decade. And you see like every year he has like a little post for it. He's like, here's what I did this year. Here's a little fun thing that happened. Here's when I was in this little shack selling my work for $15 and it rained, but it was kind of fun. And then you see him like, he obviously gets older during this time. And at a certain point, I think it was 2017, he basically got into an argument with his family that was like, this shit is stupid. Why am I doing this? I'm not making any money. The people who follow my Instagram page are like, they have like a fetish for cats. It's like, I'm not drawing cats for you. I'm drawing cats because they're cute and they're adorable, not because I want cat fetishes. So, all, like both the funny and the serious things basically led him to think, all right, I need to move on from this. And then you see him go dark for a couple years. This
being the agency work and sort of creative work, also including his side work. Mm-hmm. Like he wasn't doing his side passion work anymore because he wasn't feeling
he had given up on it.
Yeah.
And he talks about having this aha moment a few months prior to launching Cool Cats where he's like, wait, I could bring this back as an NFT. And he looks at this collage on his wall of all these different cats, right? With like different hats, different faces. And he's like, wait, this works for NFTs. So I'm going to give myself this second chance by doing NFTs. And I hope you'll be on this journey with me. For me, I saw that and I was just enchanted by it because to me, I needed a second chance, right? To this day, like I think some of the best people are people who really, really failed the first time, but decided to pick themselves back up and say, I am giving myself a second chance. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if I'm not perfectly inspired, even if it means I have to do the things I hate as if I love them, I'm going to get myself up and try something again. I was like really down in the dumps when I saw Cool Cats, but it was like $40. And for me to buy the rarest Cool Cat, it was $10,000, which was to me like humongous at the time. And maybe in the bear market, it's starting to become big again. Whereas in the bull market, I was like, take 100K here, 100K there, like take all my money, 30 ETH, like come on. But I wanted to do what he was doing. I couldn't look myself in the mirror and say that if this dude drawing cartoon cats is doing this, writing his own story, that I'm going to sit here and wallow and not do my thing.
So is the upside down cat the most expensive one?
It is the most expensive one. To me, you can debate me on this. My co-founder, Psyduck, has another one of the one-of-ones. I will come out and say, my cool cat is rarer than all of your cool cats. and the reason, I'll give a good reason for it.
Okay.
Not because I own it, but because it's not just the upside down cat. It is the naked cat. And the naked cat means that it is the cat that Cont has drawn all those years. Because you're drawing the one of one over and over and over, thousands of times again. It's always naked. You might throw a hat on every once in a while. You might make it look like Mega Man or Shrek another time. But at the end of the day, you have this naked blue cat. And that's what the upside down cool cat was. It is the only shirtless cat in the collection. I mean, maybe it has pants, but we'll never know. It's like Schrodinger's pants.
Yeah.
But for me, seeing that, like, that's the true IP. It's the IP that starts before NFTs, when Cont was a kid, and feels good owning that.
How many cats did you buy at the time? You bought the most expensive, and then...
I bought the most expensive, then I bought a few more. And then once I went to journalism school, and I couldn't bear to be in that classroom, I dropped out, got the tuition refund, and swept the floor of cats. So it was just accumulating lots of cats. I never got to like that whale status, but it felt meaningful of where that money was coming from and how I was writing my narrative with it. This goes back to investing in myself. People wanted to know, what's Andrew's story? This kid who dropped out of school and is now buying these different NFTs and trying to make a living out of it. I think people almost had a kind of like voyeuristic curiosity of like, do I want this kid to fail? Do I want him to succeed? Can he surprise me? What's he going to do?
What do you think of Cool Cats right now? Do you advise them at all? Or, and candidly, and I said this to you before we started, like, it has been this funny thing to me where it felt like Cool Cats was the biggest thing for a little while. And they had the time, partnership, which I think you were involved in. And again, I saw you from afar talking about them and being a part of them. And then it felt like they just kind of quietly became not relevant almost. And there wasn't some tremendous fall from grace. I mean, I know there were delays to the game and this and that, but they just feel like kind of quietly to the side, and that surprised me. What is your take?
I think memory, again, is very short term in this space. Part of what made Cool Cats really exciting at the beginning was that was on everybody's minds. And when something's on your mind, you can dig deep and really not only find things about the project, but write narratives around that project. So in terms of finding things, I remember one time I saw this Cool Cat and it had these stripes on it. And I was like, Claude, like, what is this? Like, is this Hobbes from Calvin and Hobbes? And he was like, dude, it is. Like, Bill Watterson is like my biggest inspiration for like being an artist. And like, I love what he did with Calvin and Hobbes. And like the same way that like Hobbes is Calvin's companion, the Cool Cat is like my companion. And when he put that out there, you could not buy a tiger cat. It went up to like $1 billion, right? Or people started memeing with the frog cats, and the frog cats were all listed at 69 ETH. Things like that kind of organic, like diving into things, writing those narratives about what Cool Cats could be, about what it is. You get that when you have people's attention for a long time. I think it's also part of the reason why there's that whole like, is Bored Apes racist thing going on, right? It's because partly, I think, because Bored Apes have been in the spotlight for so long, people will just dig and write their own narratives. And sometimes there might be a degree of truthhood to any kind of narrative you write, but it is also really just your thing. So I'm not giving my opinion on that whole fiasco controversy, but I'm saying that is a result of people spending a lot of time with what is otherwise an image and its airdrops and its utility. There's all that speculation, there's that narrative writing. And I think what hurt Cool Cats a lot, this is my opinion, like I hope I'm not like crucified for this, I think the game hurt Cool Cats a lot. Because when you had the game come out, fewer people were thinking about Klon's story, which is so special. It's so precious. It's so rare. Because you can't be some anon rugger who like hires a Fiverr artist to make that art. You have the proof that he had done that for a decade, and you have brought it into NFTs in a smart way. I think that plot was lost, and fewer people were writing out what that narrative meant. I think that's probably where like I appreciate not my journalism background, but having wanted to be a writer for so long, because it involves trying to flesh out these narratives and say why something is important. And I think when you had the game, people were evaluating Cool Cats based on what the game delivered, what the utility was, what was the value of milk, what were these coins doing, right? What does feeding the pet do? How much work do I have to put in? Is it worth it? How are the tokenomics? Is the rarity of cats relative to their price reflective of the tokens gained from it? And once you got into that narrative, it is hard to climb out. So I hope that they do. It's a challenge for everybody right now, but I think especially for Cool Cats to not only get back to that narrative of the art and the story, but to kind of reinvent yourself at this time. Never easy, but if you can give yourself a second chance, you should be able to give yourself a third chance.
Yeah. I say this all the time. This is a space, at least historically, that rewards ambiguity and punishes specificity. We like to be able to fill in gaps about what the bright future is going to look like without really knowing. And then once somebody presents something really clear, like, hey, here's a game, we tend to penalize that, to your point, because then you can very clearly evaluate, oh, is this amount of money worth this particular thing? And Bored Apes has seemed to avoid that, but their approach has been different. They've had these obviously quite different approaches. Okay, let's get into what is next for you. I'm really excited, and I'm already hearing the seeds. Things we're talking about here, I think are really those threads are gonna going to be tied into a bow in some extent in this next phase. Before we do that, we got to hear once again from our lovely sponsors.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com.
MetaMask is the leading Web3 wallet to get you access to everything you need in Web3. If you're just getting started on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. And if you need to fund your MetaMask account in order to buy that NFT that you've been eyeing, well, now you can do that directly through MetaMask. Just click the blue buy button on the home screen. Personally, I'm mad that I've spent extra gas fees transferring money from Coinbase to MetaMask in order to buy NFTs. I've been using MetaMask directly, and it is so much better. You can also buy stable coins and native tokens from Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, CeeLo, and others, and you can do it directly with your debit card, your credit card, through Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there is now an improved buying experience on MetaMask Mobile. You'll only see tokens that are in your region, so it's personalized to you, and you'll get real-time quotes, so you know you're always getting the best deal. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask yet, what are you waiting for? Go try it out. You can learn more about buying cryptocurrencies with MetaMask at metamask.io/buy-crypto. All right, so you announced Devotion, which is the next phase in your Web3 career. What is it?
You know, I think a lot of people might say we haven't announced everything yet, so I can't talk about much. To me, I feel like things like the mint date, pricing, who we're working with, what exactly we're doing, that's really only like 10% of the puzzle. I think 90% is the concept and why. Why now? What does this mean? And for me, I feel like I can talk about just about all of that. I think on a personal level, it's me wanting to come out as an artist. I'm trying to say, hey, when you're in NFTs long enough, and not only do you learn about the technology and what smart contracts can do, what royalties mean, right? But you spend time in communities, so you know what it's like to cultivate a strong community because you've been cultivated by strong ones. To being around so many artists, right? To a point where you're not just consuming their work visually, you are talking with them. They are your friends. You are seeing them at events. You are discussing art and blockchain and use cases with them. You are investing in their work. And when you invest in somebody's work like that, it's almost like a different feeling. At least for me, I'm not somebody who buys something and then just holds it, right? I will buy it and then I'll like dig into it. I'll find out as much as I can about it. I will look at every pixel. I will look at every other piece in the collection because there is something to be learned or inspired or made to think by these artists' work. And for me, I was like, all right, I've been in like this hyperbolic time chamber for a year where every day I'm spending like 14, 15, 16 hours getting hit by all these molecules, right? I've been building up all this energy. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to use it to trade? Well, it helps, certainly, when you understand an artist's work, you understand the space, you understand community. But for me, I was almost like, I'm better served trying to make art myself because I've always wanted to. And I've learned so much from people in this past year. I think a lot about this Bukowski quote, where he basically says, you know, it is preferable to do a dull thing with style than a dangerous thing without. And if you're able to do a dangerous thing with style, that's what I call art. And to me, all of crypto is dangerous. All of NFTs is dangerous, right? We've seen these wild swings, things go up and down, things moon, things plummet. One mistake can kill a project. It is always dangerous, but it is often dull as well. And oftentimes, not everything is done with style, I would say. I think we need a bit more of that. I think when you're trading, a lot of times you are doing a dangerous thing. But when you are following your alpha group and what you're told, or you're just getting some sort of inside information or alpha. There's no real style to that for me. I think style with trading is like buying the art block's bottom. Like that's stylish because you're making a statement when art blocks loses like so much volume, right? We say like when something like moon's hard, it crashes harder. Like that's style. But I think trading on most things in the space, there's not much style involved. And to me, I wanted to bring a little bit more of that fun, that spice, take all the things I've learned from the people that I've learned it from, and to show you something that looks really different and is art that raises the bar of the space. Ideally, right? Like I love devs because they're so cool when they write a different contract, right? When they reduce gas costs and then it becomes a standard.
Yeah.
Like I want to put something out for everybody to use. And I think oftentimes, art can do that. Art can be the best medium to do that, to do something that nobody's done before. You know how abstract art, everybody's like, I could do that. I could draw a line on this canvas, right?
I could be Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, I could be Rothko. Like, Jackson Pollock, look at this. Like, I'm Jackson Pollock. But it's always a question of like, well, one, there's probably more going on there. But two, and very importantly, then why didn't you do this?
Right.
And I want to show people I'm not going to ask myself that question and not do it.
I love that. Now here's my specific question.
Okay.
So is Devotion a platform, a gallery, a series of artworks made by you, a series of artworks made by you and others?
Mm-hmm. I think the vague response to that is Devotion is not a gallery, is not a studio. Devotion is almost like a church. A lot of times, I think we compare crypto to a kind of religion, and I'm not a religious person, but I'm very fascinated by it. And I think Web3, very specifically, more than anything, is about learning to organize people in different ways. Whether you're incentivizing them with tokens, whether you're building out a DAO, right? Whether you are giving people airdrops if they're holders, whether you're building in game theory, like you should burn this to get this, or you should spend time on Twitter. You should build up your following because it's important for these reasons. Or, here's how as a community we decide this is a rug versus this is a failed project. It's all about organizing people in different ways. And for me, I've been wanting like a more intimate experience, which I think these small physical places of worship have always been able to do, which is bring people in and really speak to them. I think that's where the religious part really ends for me because, I don't want to go too deep into that. But I think the more specific answer is that I'm going to be making art with my co-founders, Backseats and Psyduck. It's a really great team. Psyduck has a really, really great design background. He's known as like this whale Cool Cats trader, right? That's how people in the Cool Cats community know him. But I found out that he's this crazy designer and he knows business really, really well. And it's almost like his second phase. The more specific answer about what Devotion is it's a place to experiment. It's a place to go into both of my co-founder and I's minds to say, like, what are they thinking about? What excites them about Web3 and NFTs? Is it artists doing new things, right? Is it the technology? Like, we can upgrade it in some way. We can improve a smart contract in some way. Backseats is often like he writes in our group chat, I invented something. And when you hear that, you just get excited.
Yeah,
right?
that's
We've
sick.
been in Web3 so long. This guy wakes up and calls you and says, Andrew, I've invented something. Like, that's what I want to be doing. And it's this idea of like, we're all coming out as artists in our own way because there's so many ways to get into art from a Web3 perspective. I can't paint. Like, my hands tremor a little bit when I raise them. I've always thought like, oh, I can't be a painter because my hand shakes and it looks stupid. There's so many ways to create art in the space. I mean, thinking of artists who work with AI, for example, I think their work is super, super awesome. And with DALL-E giving commercial rights to people as of today, I think that'll be super exciting to see where that goes. But for me, it's us three coming out as artists and knowing that we can do dangerous things with style. And I would say another specific answer is there are artists that I want to work with. And there are artists who I think we can experiment with and do really fun things with. And I think it's a way to make the space more delightful. for somebody to wake up and not expect what they saw yesterday because we're doing something new. We've innovated something small or innovated something big. And when you see that happen and you know it's done in an intimate setting where we sort of deliver that and deliver it in an episodic way where you know that over time, it's like, here's episode 1 and then here's episode 2. And each one is meant to delight, to possibly cause controversy, to make you think. All of that, I think, is doing justice to my experience in the space, which is having felt differently because of someone or something.
I want to ask about this episodic piece. What does it mean in this context? When I think of episodes, I think of television, right? And so there's a full narrative, and then I tune in next week to see the continuation of that narrative. Based on what I've heard you say about this so far, it sounds like there may be that narrative storytelling piece. There will be a thread that binds drop to drop. It obviously, I don't think, is like full television show style. It's going to be a little bit maybe more abstract. But I've also heard you mention the ERC 998 standard, which I'm not entirely familiar with, but it has to do with composability. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there may also be some sort of interactive component for audience members to I'm fishing here for reactions on your face. How warm or cold am I to what you all are thinking about?
Well, I think it's like when you introduce a TV show to a friend and they're like, do I have to watch in order? And the answer is like,
who asks, do I have to watch? Oh, like, do I start from the newest season,
like for example, like Black Mirror, right? Like
you don't have to watch in order.
You don't have to watch The Office in order.
Got
but if you do, like, you will get something out of that
fair.
order.
Yes.
Or Black Mirror, you'll be like, no, you can just watch whatever. It's literally an anthology.
Yes.
Or Love, Death, and Robots. Do I need to watch in order? No, but there might be a reason why they put it in that order to give you a certain feeling at a certain time.
Okay.
I think, without saying too much, I think we're sort of that latter perspective where these episodes will be delightful and fascinating on their own, and they will all do something new, and we'll never do what we did once again. But if you could only get exposure to, just that one episode, it should be able to affect you in some way. It's not just like this leads to this, leads to this, leads to that. But it's also not just, jumping around. And I think, without saying too much, I think it gets to this idea of there's so many expectations in this space, and oftentimes they turn into obligations when they shouldn't, right? I think that's why I feel so attracted to art. When art blocks comes out, you don't expect them to say, hey, if you're holding a Fidenza, right, like, you necessarily get another thing. Like, maybe in some cases, the artist can say that, but when you mint art blocks, like, you get this feeling of like, I'm getting this thing, and it's art, and it's part of art blocks, which stands for this vision and does things a certain way, like I talked about with Snowfro, but it is a piece in and of itself. And I think, for me, I always want to eliminate that kind of infinite obligation. It is both a blessing and a curse. I want to be dedicated, devoted even to something, without running around and scrambling just to give people what they want. Oftentimes, people don't know what they want. I think giving people like what they didn't know they wanted is better than giving what people want, like, right off the bat.
It's the Ford line of, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Exactly.
And then he gave them cars.
Exactly. It's like, I'm a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan, but everybody wants Dancing in the Moonlight by Top Loader, and James Gunn is like, I'm literally getting like threats about putting in Dancing in the Moonlight. And for some people, listeners out there, that's one of my favorite songs. But I understand where he's coming from, because it is too obvious for Guardians of the Galaxy, and there are more songs to show and more scenes to create based off of that soundtrack. But I think if there is any alpha to give, I think I would look at who Andrew is really fascinated by. Who does he love? And I don't want to say anything about like I'm working with this person necessarily, but I can rattle off the top of my head who has taught me things in the space. Just do that right now, right? Tyler Hobbs has taught me how to think systematically, even if I don't know how to program. All-Seeing Seneca, who drew the Bored Apes, has taught me that, right? Like, you should give yourself a second chance, right? Even if you're known for one thing, you can be known for another. Cont taught me that as well. Drifter shoots, I've climbed with him.
Wait, I saw that photo. Did you go up and climb somewhere really high and get your feet picture taken?
Oh yeah.
Where were
I
you?
risked it all.
Where were you? Was this like a free climb, or do you get like hooked in?
It is always a free climb.
This is making me so clammy.
I really
like,
hope
I can
my mom
feel
doesn't
myself
watch this
sweating.
episode because she doesn't know that I did that. Yeah, I climbed with Drift and a dear friend of ours, Toby Lasso. But
I don't want to interrupt. Keep listing the people who are impactful to you. But I wanted to ask you about that Drifter Shoots thing.
I want to go back to it.
Oh my God.
I want to go back to it. I mean, after Drift, Drift taught me a lot about freedom, right? Yeah. And what it means for the body to not be free, but the mind to be always free. Tom Sachs. Tom Sachs is special to me because I mentioned my uncle earlier in the episode. Tom Sachs worked the same jobs as my uncle. And part of my greatest regret with my uncle is I resented that he was a blue-collar guy when we were these kids in the suburbs trying to, look like all the white families, try to, live the American dream. And here was a guy who didn't look like it at all, who didn't speak a lick of English. Meeting Tom Sachs, who worked all the same jobs as my uncle, but became one of the greatest artists ever. And being able to, cry out all my tears, right, on his gray sweatshirt, telling him about my uncle, knowing that they're in some ways cut from the same cloth, to see, in some ways, an example of what my uncle could have been had he lived longer, had he had a different revelation about his life and what he wanted to do. Tom Sachs's revelation is when he worked as a janitor, and he worked a literally shitty job, as he says, and he was like a ninja because he did his janitor job better than every other janitor who worked there. And he said it was because it was a job that breeds a lot of resentment. And he said one day he looked in the toilet and he told himself, I can either resent this toilet or I can make it shine. And when he decided to make it shine, that's when he became an artist. That's when nothing could stop him. And that's when he became destined to be one of the greatest artists ever. Seeing that story in Tom and being able to imagine it in my uncle and then myself, saying it doesn't matter where you come from. It matters what you learn from it. And what's important is to get over whatever resentment you've had, to be the person you're meant to be. Once that seed is planted into your head, there is nobody and nothing that can stop you from reaching that. Seeing that reflected in Tom, that's what Tom taught me. So knowing artists like that in the space, in some ways I feel like I have not beat the game of NFTs. I have not traded as well as most. I have not made tons of money. I do get thrown into drama and controversy, even though I try to avoid it. Maybe I'm kind of a drama queen in that regard, but I have almost beaten the game of life because with my uncle, that was something I thought I would never get over. It would just always be a chip on my shoulder or, a little crack in this glass that I could never fix. And Tom helped me fill it with gold, right? That whole idea of kintsugi. I felt that I had filled that crack with gold instead of trying to turn it to pretend it doesn't exist. Having met artists like that, again, not saying those are the artists I'm necessarily working with, but this kid who a year ago was going to give up, being inspired by so many people, that was the idea planted into my head. And at some point, I just couldn't avoid it. I couldn't not look at it any longer. I found 2 co-founders who have felt the same way about their own lives. That's why I chose them and not another influencer or not someone with a big platform or necessarily the person who is the most known in the space. I needed to work with those 2 because we have the same feeling. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight into why devotion is important. It's this feeling of I'm learning to be devoted to myself and my story most of all. My co-founders feel the same way about themselves and their own lives. So we're coming together to work on cool things, experiment, explore where this mind can really go when we have this awesome tech of Web3, and then deliver that to you to hopefully set you off on that journey yourself, which is, I think, what great art should be able to do.
What has been the reaction from your community, from the audience, to you shifting into really being an artist?
I think they understand. I think a lot of my friends, I often get asked by my friend Emily, she's like, I have 1/10 of the followers you do, and I get so much anxiety about my DMs, people asking me for things. I cannot imagine how often you're asked for things. And like, yeah, I'm asked for things a lot. You don't see it on the surface because I either try to like be nice about it, or I try to find another way to help them that doesn't involve like marketing, because I'm not interested in that. But I think they understand that it's going to make me less anxious and less busy. And then they're going to start to see a better Andrew come out. It's been a pretty good response. It hasn't been a response of people saying like, oh, like this is going to be valuable. How do I mint it? It's more like, good for you for doing that. You know, good for you for making art. Like somebody's like, I was wondering when you do something like this. And when you hear something like that, it's like, that is a very special compliment.
What's so interesting is it feels like clearly the seeds for this have been here all along. The fact I've never thought about being a painter. I have absolutely no interest in being a painter. The fact that you're like, oh, I can't be a painter because I shake, indicates that you had at one point thought about that. When I hear you've mentioned it here, I've heard you in other conversations mention like jealousy, being jealous of Clon or feeling jealous of things. Jealousy is an indication of what we want in life, right? And so clearly you've had, and maybe we're even drawn to this industry in the very beginning because you wanted to do something like this or be an artist maybe. Do you agree with that? When was the moment you were like, I think what I want to do is be an artist?
I think I always thought it would be at like my worst times. You know, a lot of times when we talk about a leap of faith, you take the leap of faith when you have nothing to lose. But I think equally important is taking that leap of faith when you have a lot to lose, when things are going well, when you have a system that works and is established and has benefited you and benefited others, right? There are times when I've wanted to be an artist when I felt bad. An example of that is, you know, these are the story about my friends. But when I was at VCon in Minneapolis, a lot of my friends are really incredible artists. And I remember going to the Fewocious paint party. And we got there, and a lot of people were excited to see us because it was me, Danny Cole from Creature, Vinny from Letters, and Jasty. And everybody was like, Vinny, draw something. Danny, draw something. And they were almost like superheroes. They're like, yeah, I got you. Like, pull out the pen, right? Like, Vinny always, you know, goes for the black first, and then Danny gets these fun colors. And they just start, like, vibing and jamming on this canvas. And I'm standing there by myself, like, holding my beer, like, I'm so glad I have this beer in my hand, because then it would be glaringly obvious that I'm the only one not picking up a marker to jam and do cool things. And at that moment, I felt like a bit humiliated, one, because I know how awesome my friends are, but it was that feeling of like, I can't do this thing with my hand, but maybe I can do something else. But then there are other times when things are working out and, you know, I seem to have found my stride, but it feels like I could do more. And I always ask this to my friends, like, to be your best self, do you need a chip on your shoulder? Do you need an enemy? Do you need an antagonist?
I think about this.
Right? Do you need your opposite, your antithesis, right? This, like, person that's out to kill you. I always wish I were a twin, because I would hope that he were evil. So, like, being more evil, like, he would try to kill me. You don't want to be a twin.
You want to have an evil twin.
I want to have an evil twin because my evil twin would show me what I am not to make me realize what I am. So I envy the twins out there, especially the ones with evil twins, because, like, that evil twin drives you, right? Because if you're not more good than he is evil, your evil twin will, like, be cooler than you. And, like, you can't have your twin be cooler than you. Like, that would be devastating. And so for me, I'm like, do you need, like, a big constraint like that?
Yeah.
And you can think about what it is for various artists. I would say a glaring one, just gonna put it out there. For Seneca, it's Yuga. I'm not saying Yuga is her enemy, but I'm saying, like, that is something that, you know, is present in her story, and might not be sunshine and rainbows all the way through. for Drift. It was the law, being in jail for 6 months, right? Even when his work was selling for so much, that court case was still ongoing, right? And he had to win, which he did. But then it's the question of, if you have an enemy, I felt like I had an enemy when I was first getting into NFTs. It was easy to say, this industry is messed up. It's the people reading my stuff. Like, I hate them. I resent them. Why can't you be more empathetic? Why can't you be more nice? Why can't you be more thoughtful? Like, why do you have to be this way? But I feel like I conquered that with my uncle. Like, why does this happen to me? Right? Like, why does everybody else get to have this, but I don't get to have this? Why do I get nice things in my life? Like, my parents make, good money. They're able to send me to a nice boarding school afterwards. I don't have the same connections as people, but I'm able to get into a good school and get an education. But why do I have this one thing that looms over me? And why do other people not have to deal with that? I think Tom Sachs helped me over that. And so I've vanquished these foes, it feels like. But then it makes me ask, my life is a lot better because I've been able to do that. Do I need to find another enemy?
Yeah.
And I think I'm kind of the view now that you don't need that enemy or that humiliation. You just need something that you need to improve upon or something that you need to get past. A barrier, a hurdle. It doesn't have to be a wall. I much prefer to see a hurdle because there's a path to get over that hurdle. You have to learn to jump the right way. I always try to do a hurdle analogy because I was a hurdler in college and high school, but it's this idea of it doesn't have to destroy you. It doesn't have to ruin you. It doesn't have to make you depressed. It doesn't have to drive you to the edge of insanity or depression. It can make you want to lift your body up to get over.
My fiance and I talk about this because to an extent, we're both like, wow, we have this happy relationship and I'm in love and I'm going to marry this person. And for so many years, I think for a lot of people, right, there's this drive of part of the chip on your shoulder is
death drive.
Yeah, but it's also finding a person, you know what I mean? A lot of us do a lot of things to put it crudely to get laid, right? And there's that's sort of a motivating thing. And then you find your person that you're spending forever with and you're like, God, what motivates
you're
me now?
Did I beat the game? Is it over?
What? So it's finding new things from which to draw to really, to push forward. And also, there's been other chips on my shoulders, but I totally get that. What is your art style? Do you feel like you have one yet, or you're in the process of honing it or determining what your artistic expression is?
I think really for me, it's trying to solve problems in the space and seeing all the cool ideas that can come out of it. For me, when I did Relief, when I co-founded that, we bootstrapped it in 36 hours. I was on some Adderall. Sorry, Mom. So so I wouldn't have to sleep and I'd be focused. I really wanted to do this thing. Yeah. Basically, we raised over $1 million in the first drop in 30 seconds. And we donated that all to Ukraine to get past some of their issues, with their national bank, putting really, really strict withdrawal limits. Crypto helped us get over that, network with the right people. Instead of necessarily buying guns, we could get money to hospitals, help people get out of the country, et cetera, et cetera. To me, it was I was in some ways the only person who wasn't an artist, but I also was, in the sense that the artists submitted art, they drew things, they put it together. The dev was an artist because he came up with a really awesome smart contract in a day, and it was totally smooth. It worked. Nothing wrong happened with it. But for me, part of it was thinking here we are building something where it doesn't matter if you're a bot. It doesn't matter if you're a flipper. All that money is going to be donated. So we build a model that incentivizes it because we are making sure the value is going to be above the price of what it costs to mint. And setting up something like that to me is a kind of art. I think to me right now, I'm thinking a lot about game theory. Really fun for me to think about how I can simplify the decisions that people have to make. But under the hood, it's super, super complex. And all these things market dynamics. What do things have to do? How are people prompted? One of my co-founders was showing me this what do you call it? It's yes, no type of thing.
Decision tree.
Decision tree.
Yeah.
For sending a notification to your phone when someone sends a message. And apparently you would think it's just they send you a message, send it to your phone. But there are so many qualifiers that would make it so that you wouldn't get that notification or you wouldn't get pinged on your phone. And to me, that's fun. And I want to, one of my other co-founders, Psyduck, says this a lot. When you see an iceberg like floating above the water,
You don't see all that's underneath
you don't
it.
see all of it, but also what's important is like it helps you can kind of imagine like how big it must be to be able to like hold up like that, right? For it to not be like floating around, like, because if it really is just the top part, that thing is gonna melt, right? That thing's gone. That thing's gonna like float around like a polar bear can like swipe at it and it's gone. But for it to like be there still, you know, like the mass it's gonna take underneath. And I just want to like build out all that mass so the top part is like stable, and you kind of get a sense of it.
But to be clear, you are also doing visual art stuff.
For sure.
Okay.
But I'm just saying like the conceptual stuff is so fun.
Yeah.
Because I'm finally understanding, I think, a lot of what goes into modern art, which is having a very, very powerful concept and all the under the hood stuff.
Who are you studying? You obviously named some of your influences. Are there others you're studying from an artistic perspective?
I think, you know, I do have a little bit of an art history background. The main reason is because I had a really, really big crush on my art history professor in college.
Okay.
And I wanted to impress her and get her to
I'm
love
telling
me.
you, this is the just
She-
wanting to get late, not to, but like, you know, it's just like
You're right,
the
you're
driving
right.
force behind society.
Oh, she's just like this, maybe it's wrong for me to say, but like this like beautiful and like talented Italian woman. And I remember one day she was showing us like Caravaggio on a slideshow, because I don't know where the original Caravaggio is. But she was telling me about how like you can tell from the way Jesus' feet are, like he's like not actually dead, but he's alive. And he's like tears are streaming down her face, and she's like, oh, like I'm sorry, like somebody like please tell me like what you think about this. Andrea, and I was like, you can call me Andrea. And
Call me
you know,
whatever you want.
again, like that was like a lot of the motivation to get into art history. But I think for me, I'm starting to revisit a lot of the classical work. I am spending more time at the MoMA. I'm going back to the Met. I think that really old shit really inspires me as well. Even from like Michelangelo talking about, you know, liberating the statue from the marble. All those ideas, if not represented on a visual level, have strong concepts. And for me, I just want to carry those over, because I have this feeling that if the concept is really strong, the visual part will almost write itself. So I would say a lot more conceptual art, but not too serious too. I feel like when we talk about that old stuff, we think it's going to be like super serious.
Stuffy or something.
Some of it will be like fun, but you know what's like both stuffy and not stuffy? I think when Michelangelo was making the David, I'm pretty sure, this could be a complete lie, I'm pretty sure he had this like patron who like wanted to pay for it, and Michelangelo was like, boom, like here's your David, like what do you think? This is like drunk history, I feel like I'm doing that now. And the patron's like, like very nice, but the nose is not perfect, the nose is just a little weird. And Michelangelo's like, granted, like you're right, let me fix the nose. So he gets the ladder and then he climbs up on the ladder, but he has like some like marble dust or like salt in his pocket, and he like takes it out and he like pretends to chisel on it while sprinkling the dust. He's like, voila, like I fixed the nose. And the guy's like, voila, like now it is perfect. But it's just, you know, it's just
the
like,
same
you know,
thing,
even
yeah.
those guys had a bit of fun. And I think it's gonna be really cool and serious at times and inspiring, but it's also gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that's what excites me. Keeping your options open, not pigeonholing yourself as like, I am this person in NFTs. I think that's what NFTs are so good for. And have fun with it.
You had a line about like art that changes, but also art that changes you. And it made me think of Danny Cole, who I understand is like a friend of yours. And he was the first person who really helped me understand this concept of like NFTs can allow art to be immersive in a way that you can't do in the traditional art world, because you can have a piece of art change based on inputs you have, right? So he's like, he did things, right, where you could have the smile, like you could go on this journey and then there would be a smile on the NFT based on the fact that you'd gone through this journey.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about Danny Cole. He is a really weird kid, but he's also one of the most amazing people that I've ever met.
Yeah.
I think what made that interesting was called Creature's Second Journey. What was
Yes.
interesting about that was he answered the question of why it had to be an NFT. And that to me is a really strong concept, because I could like get a piece of paper right now and I could like draw something on it, I could take a picture of it, and I could mint it as an NFT. And have I answered the question of why it had to be an NFT? Maybe. Like the royalties, putting my name on something. You see something like that, and like, like it's not Andrew's best work. It's like, it might be up there in terms of what he's put out there so far. But it's this idea of like, has he really answered why it had to be an NFT or utilized the technology to its fullest potential? Maybe not. But Creature's Second Journey was trying to do that in some way. The idea of like, the way you came in is not the way you will come out. It's this idea of like, you can't step into the same river twice, because the river has flowed differently and you're a different person each time you step in. He was sort of doing that with Creature's Second Journey. And one way to read it is, you change the mouth. Great. But another way to read it is, you've answered the question of why it had to be an NFT. This is a really cool use case that's out there. It may not be the first, but it is definitely, to me, a clear-cut example of why only NFTs can do this. Because if he painted it for you, you can't really do that. Van Gogh, there was like a hidden Van Gogh self-portrait in another Van Gogh painting that was X-rayed recently. So I guess you could put like another like creature on top of the canvas. But like for the art itself, like it felt new and it felt different. And to me, it's about aligning the strength of concept with what draws you in, which is oftentimes these visual markers or something that's compelling or familiar or nostalgic or fun or new or different. When you bring both together, I think you have a winning formula.
It reminds me, I don't know that he said it in my conversation with him recently, but I think in my prep for interviewing Snowfro, I heard him say, like, that was one of the conceits around art blocks, was how can I find a use case for the blockchain that, like, couldn't be done anywhere else, like that it has to have the blockchain to function the way it does, which is how part of how art blocks was born. And I think Danny was achieving something quite similar with that. And it was funny when I interviewed him, he was like, his sense of humor is such that like really going over the top with what this thing was going to be, which ultimately ended up being the mouth change, is like he that's his sense of humor, which I also think is hilarious when he was really spelling that out for me. But I do think it like caused some pushback in the community with people being like, what? It's a mouth change. But when you really understand the concept behind it, it actually is really amazing and cool. And again, that's why with the art world, I can totally see how this stuff all has tremendous value in 10 years in a way that I maybe can't even see for some of these more community-based concepts, because there are art connoisseurs out there who pay tremendous money for something novel or special or whatever in the art world. Okay, let's bring it back to drifter shoots.
Okay.
So walk me through where you guys were and how this went down.
Okay. So I think
for folks who don't know, Drifter Shoots is a photographer, super talented, and his series that he's probably best known for,
Where My Vans Go.
And it's his feet high in the air, like photographed against these landscapes that demonstrate he's high in the air. So he free climbs. That's nuts. Okay.
It is pretty nuts.
And so you joined him on a free climb and got your feet taken in the photo.
I did.
Which is badass.
And I was at the beginning very scared, and by the end of it, strangely, very, very calm. I think one of my favorite movies is Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. And
don't tell me the ending. I still haven't seen it.
I won't tell
I think
the
I know
ending.
part of the ending.
I will tell you the beginning.
Okay.
Which is when they explain how magic is done.
Okay.
And they say magic is done in 3 parts. You have the pledge, which is when you show somebody something that seems ordinary, but of course is not. Something is about to happen. And then you have the turn, which is the second step, which is you take that seemingly ordinary object, and you manipulate it in some way. You make it disappear, right? And then finally, the most important thing is the pledge, which is it's easy to make something disappear. It is much harder to bring it back. And the whole narrative behind that process of magic is that if you know something is not ordinary, right? Like if I have like, those magic balls, like those red like poofy balls, like like that thing, like it's so easy to like make it disappear, like move it and stuff. You don't actually want to know how the magician does it. you want to be fooled. You want to be
You want to buy into the magic.
And that's part of what makes magic magic. And for me, I was worried that when I went on probably what was a more difficult climb with Drift, that I would have that magic broken, that I would see like, does this dude just take the elevator? I was so worried. I was so scared. We would get into this building and he'd be like, all right, guys, check this out. And then he would press the elevator and we would just go up. No, of course, that would be discrediting Drift for his narrative and all of that he's been through. But what I mean to say is, like, I don't think it's important to necessarily say everything that we did. I did get a kind of under the hood look, and it was tough. It was physically demanding. I could probably say it took over an hour to climb the building because we were climbing it by foot. And
so you climbed a building as in, like, did you walk upstairs?
I would say one of the sections was walking up the stairs over and over and over and over and over again. But there were other parts that might have required, some physical ability.
Like more scaling.
Maybe.
And then do you end up on like the roof essentially of this building and put your feet over the edge?
Yeah, so it's not like he just like, look, I think it's like his process to talk about it and not mine.
Drifter shoots,
Drifter
how we
shoots.
call him. You are welcome on anytime.
Right, but what I will say is, I think a lot of people think that this is about getting up and being like hype, and I can almost like buy that if you're getting exposure to his work for the first time. Like, here's this daredevil who does it. I think you always have to qualify it with something. The New York Times actually did a good job. They said Drift was, quote, a cat burglar who stole only the view. And that was almost like a rebuttal to the people who saw him as a criminal for, quote unquote, trespassing and not making art. But for me, I think what surprised me about that climb, we also climbed with Toby Lasso, who both of them are veterans who have struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. When they got up, they weren't hype. Like, I was probably the most hype person up there. But quickly I settled into it. It was almost this feeling of peace, of calmness, of meditation. You can feel the anxiety melt away. You can see that creative side come out. And it's not like, all right, let's run up there and let's like throw our feet over and like get dangerous and take a photo. It in some ways was the furthest thing from that. There's a video of me on Twitter talking about what that experience was like and why it kind of humbled me. And that to me is exciting. And not only being inspired by Drift's visual work, seeing where my vans go, and being an owner. I own a shot of the Queensboro Bridge, which is like my favorite bridge in the city because it is the Spider-Man bridge. It's where Spider-Man and MJ go to kind of hang out, to get away from the world. And I love the last Spider-Man movie because that's where they were in the opening scene. But I also like Spider-Man because, like, it's that whole, like, dead uncle thing. I don't know. I have a huge mural of Spider-Man in my childhood home that I will never take down. It is floor to ceiling. It's the scene where he's trying to save Gwen Stacy, jumping down the clock tower and shooting that web and trying to catch her before she hits the ground. But I own that piece by Drift, and he took me to a building where I would have an aerial view of the piece that I own.
Wow.
So, like, how special is that?
That's
being
very
able to
cool.
get that experience. And when you have something like that, it's like, that is something that most people in their lives won't get to experience. And I always think about the Andrew that had stayed in school, that had done everything he was supposed to do, had never taken this leap of faith. He and Isaac would have never met. Isaac is Drift. He would have never climbed.
How did you meet Isaac?
With another climb. It was easy mode. I feel like this last one was more medium mode. The first one was easy mode. It was the last NFT NYC. Long story short, I was going to go to this party that I'd been invited to, and as I was trying to get in, the bouncers were being complete assholes to this guy. I hope it's okay that I say it. And I was like, wait, that's DK Kwan. Like, the DK Kwan, the Destiny DK Kwan, like one of the greatest animators ever, DK Kwan. And I'm seeing these people like be mean to him. And I'm like, you know what? Like, F that. Like, I'm not going to this party. Like, this party's dumb. Like, it just became uncool.
That's awesome.
And I was just chilling out there with DK. And then I get this text from a guy saying, like, hey, like, what are you up to? I didn't see the number. I didn't see the name attached to the number. And I was just like, I'm chilling. Like, I was going to go to this party, but I might just go home. And he's like, meet me at this address in Times Square. And he sent a black heart emoji. And I'm like, no. Because Drift uses the black heart emoji. So I was like, is Drift hitting me up? And I was like, DK, I love you, bro, but I'm out. And so
So basically Drift hit you up randomly one day to do a
he hit
climb.
me up. I think I had like given him my number at some point because we had talked a bit on Twitter. Obviously, I already own one of his. I think I own one of his pieces by then. But he just hit me up randomly because he felt it.
That's
and again,
sweet.
it was that magic. I
Yeah.
get to Times Square. I get to this building. He's wearing all black, right? He has his backpack with his camera and his equipment. And I get there and he like flashes this key card. And he's like, I commandeered this. It's again with the prestige. Like, I want to know, like, how did you get this? But then I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I want the magic to be there. I want to do this climb. And we had a really nice long chat up there. And a few weeks ago, we leveled up again. So
Amazing. So are you going to go for another one at some point?
I'm ready to climb by myself. I will say, like, be careful if you're climbing. Yeah, I got caught on one of, basically is what I'm trying to say. I was caught on one of my climbs. And sometimes you have to take L's, right? To get to your W's. It's fun. I think I'm hesitant to just go more and more extreme. Because Drift inspired me, and for Drift, it's not about getting at as extreme as possible. I think that's a misconception. That's actually not too common because he does a very good job of explaining why he does what he does. It's not about being a daredevil. It's not about risking your life and being stupid. It's about solving problems and finding peace and finding a place where you feel creative. And in that process, achieving it. And so for me, if I'm really inspired by Drift, it's not about trying to find the most extreme thing or like quote unquote illegal thing to climb. Like, I don't want to incriminate myself on a podcast, but I think to me it's more about what did it mean to do this climb? What did I get out of it? And if I'm doing something else, what can I expect to get out of it? And how might I evaluate that process in deciding if I want to climb something else? Like, I'm not going to do it just because it's crazy, just because I can get a crazy photo. It would be for what inspired me to collect his work in the first place before we even climbed, his story and what it does for him emotionally and creatively.
Last question. Any book recommendations?
Book recommendations.
Or like, what are your favorite books?
I think for me, I oftentimes will read a book and pull just like one thing out of it. I think I went to a college where we had to read all these Greek authors and like the Western canon. So just because of my exposure to that, that's something that inspires me. I mean, even this ring that I'm wearing, it's my school ring, and I wear it because
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Columbia. I transferred there. It was the only school I got into, and I found out I got in after getting into a car accident that just wrecked me, and I was on my way to the hospital when I found out. We have this building called Butler Library where it has all these like classical greats on the frieze. It goes Homer, Herodotus, Sophocles, Plato, Aristotle, Demosthenes, Cicero, Virgil, like these great Greek and Latin writers, poets, like epic authors. And of course, like there are so many ways to like subvert it. Like I had some friends put up the names of important women authors like Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison like over it. So like you can play around with it, but I think for me, like I'm inspired by the idea of like a canon of these greats. I would say one of the biggest for me, and I actually have it on the inside of the ring. I have like the words of the frieze in it because I think it's kind of cool. I love that like adventure stuff. I would say Nietzsche, like books by Nietzsche are really, really big for me. Nietzsche to me was like the first like self-help writer. he basically has this book called Beyond Good and Evil, where he talks about how, like, for most of history, it was just about whether you are weak or strong. But then at some point, the weak started seeing the strong as evil and created this conception of good and evil. But ultimately what it's about, the real self-help part, is saying that there are a lot of people who are resentful in life, who think one day, right, those who are weak will, like, beat the strong because they're good. And what he basically says is, like, dude, like, make your life what it's meant to be, right? That resentment can only help you take revenge, but it might not help you lead the best life that you're supposed to live. And to me, that's like self-help in a lot of ways. Yeah. And it's the basis of most self-help books.
It harkens me to the Tom Sachs comment you made, right? Like, it's so easy to get resentful working as a janitor and feeling like you've been dealt a bad hand, but if you turn it into something else, and it's not about in relation to others or in relation to the work, it becomes a superpower.
Exactly. Like, if there's one phrase to represent my whole time in Web3 and NFTs so far, is overcoming resentment. And what follows from overcoming resentment is imposing meaning on the world, changing the world, changing yourself, doing what you're meant to do. So of course, if my first year in NFTs was overcoming that resentment, now it is time to create. And, you know, I'm in this chair right now. Nietzsche has this other thing where he says, look, like, most people spend their lives sitting in a chair, waiting for something to happen, feeling like they weren't dealt the best card in life, best hand in life. And what he says is, like, for a lot of people, you might not get that moment that makes you leap out of your seat. A lot of people say, like, one day my time will come and it, like a volcano, like, I'm gonna erupt and, like, get out of my seat and do this amazing thing, become rich, meet the love of my life, do what I was meant to do. But oftentimes that day never really comes. And sometimes that day comes, but you're too late, which is almost like the worst thing. Like, when you're in a bathtub long enough, your hands start to get pruny. When you sit in a chair long enough, your legs start to go numb. And it's this idea of, like, if you wait for that time to come and it comes too late, you'll be like, all right, like, here's my time. You try to get out of the chair, but you can't because your knees have gotten so weak from sitting. And that sucks. I don't want that. I don't want to feel that way. So, like, crypto and NFTs and Web3 are so fascinating to me because, especially in a bear market, I can tell myself I no longer need to wait on that time and that calling. The calling has already come, right? It's within myself, and I have to get up and, you know, find discipline, find creativity, find that emotional, you know, availability to put myself into this different world and hopefully, you know, help write a small part of it. And if I've done that, then I've probably succeeded. And everything we often talk about, you know, wealth, status, connections, most of all, happiness will probably follow from that.
I'll have you know that when I asked Danny Cole what he reads, he informed me he absolutely does not read. He hates reading. He read a book in high school and vowed never to read again. And then later he mentioned something and said, oh no, I don't want to say that. It might encourage people to read.
Might encourage people to read.
So I appreciate your answer.
Look, I'm not a great reader either. I think I had a lot of people who sat me down and said, you need to read.
You know what you should read? And
I've
mentioned this book multiple times on the podcast, and I mentioned it to Fuocious, and Fuocious was like, oh my God, I read that when I was younger, and it changed my life, and it's like made me the artist who I am. And it is The War of Art.
The War of Art.
The War of Art. It's short as you're beginning or continuing your creative journey. Like, if you are a creative, you need to read this book. Anyways, I think you'll really enjoy it. And it's short, and it's like an easy read, and it's kind of funky in the way it's laid out, and Fuocious stands by it. So, and I will say, I had somebody come up to me at VCon and say, your podcast changed my life because I read this book because I heard you mention it on your podcast. So anybody who's like in a creative pursuit, or really like it applies beyond that, should read The War of Art. Thank you, Danny Green. I try to shout you out because he turned me on to that book. Okay. Andrew, this was a blast. 2 hours, one of the longer ones.
2 hours? Oh my gosh. Sorry, I didn't know what that
Don't
long.
apologize. That's why I booked it for a long time. And I can't wait to run into you again and have you on in the future and see where devotion goes, and just really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I know I give long answers.
I love it. This is why I like podcasts. It's long form. There's no rules here.
Thank
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.